Thanks for joining us on Not Boring CEs, where we don't think you should be bored to death while getting your continuing ed. Keep listening here, then hop over to notboringces.com to get all your online CE credits. All right, y'all, let's get to learning. Elena Kopel is a compassion-focused, anti-oppression, nature-based therapist. She specializes in working with LGBTQIA2S plus children, teens, and adults, survivors of the troubled teen industry, and those with religious trauma. She graduated with her master's in nature-based counseling in 2023 and has been working in private practice since. Her capstone research project, Redefining the Future of Wilderness Therapy, Addressing Accessibility and Nature-Based Traumas, asked nature-based therapists to question their role in perpetuating harmful wilderness programs and offered alternative options for treatment. She has now turned her sights on creating safe, healing therapeutic spaces for those who have been harmed in the name of therapy in the past. Elena is currently enrolled in a year-long course to become a certified religious trauma and cult abuse therapist. She is a proud member of the LGBTQIA2S+ community and has served as a leadership member of the Queer Summer Camp for the last decade. All right, we have Elena Kopel here, and we're going to be talking about nature-based interventions. So first, Elena, will you kind of tell us what got you interested in nature-based work?
Absolutely. So I was a camp counselor at the summer camp that I went to as a teenager. And at the time I was an acting major. Shout out to all the former theater kids. And I had known for a while that that wasn't really jiving. It was what I had done my whole life. And then I go and I work at this summer camp. And if you talk to any summer camp person, they'll probably tell you life changing, best thing ever. All of those things were true for me. And I did what is now a very famous Google search in my lore, which is how to be a camp counselor as a career. And I found nature-based therapy. And I was like, oh, okay, I could do that. And so I ended up going to graduate school for nature-based therapy. And really what kind of got me involved in this work was I experienced what I consider a trauma while backpacking on the Appalachian Trail. And I didn't realize it immediately, but I started to notice my relationship with nature changed and my safety in nature changed. And that was really hard. That was very confusing for me as someone who loved the outdoors to feel that rupture. And so I just felt kind of like from a selfish desire, like, I can't be the only one who now has a challenging relationship with the outdoors or feels like I can't access the space that was so dear to me. And that kind of started all of this. So, yeah.
Amazing. And I think about when most people think about nature therapy, or any sort of like using nature at all in therapy. Most people imagine, well, you've got to be on a bunch of land and you got to have like the river right there, or you got to be in the woods somewhere. Can we talk about ways that we can bring in and like incorporate nature-based interventions into more typical spaces?
Absolutely. And I'm glad we're touching on this right at the beginning, because I think this is something that is so important to everything we'll talk about today, which is I remember the first day of my graduate school program in nature-based therapy, we did this exercise that essentially defined what nature is. And I remember sitting there like, this is kind of limited. It was, yeah, like you said, it was in the backcountry, an hour away from medical care, all of these factors, which I can understand those certain aspects of, a wilderness trip and things like that. However, that is not all that nature is.
Right.
And so I think something that I've really had to kind of build into my practice and I'm excited to share and talk about is that the definition of nature that so many of us carry is very, very limited. And so when we talk about bringing nature-based therapy or nature-based techniques into any setting, it really is, I think, far more simple than people let ourselves think it is.
Mhm.
So, for example, there are studies that show even if you have a picture of a forest in your office that has no windows, or you're playing, your sound machine has like a rain shower or ocean noises, that has a benefit. That improves focus, that improves mood and concentration. That's all there. And so, yeah, so that's one way, just kind of bringing in nature into your space. Potted plants. I have had just bins of soil before for kid
Mhm.
clients to play in. Metaphor, oh my gosh, the nature metaphors write themselves. Planting
Yes.
seeds, gardening, all of that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it really is abundant. And I think the piece of just challenging, because a lot of people who live in a big city or who maybe don't have a background in feeling outdoorsy feel like, oh, well, no, I'm not a naturey person. I can't access nature. And even just challenging that, well, no, actually, just by being a person, you are outdoorsy. And we can access and build connection with nature anywhere. So I think that challenging piece is big as well.
Yeah. So you don't even necessarily have to be going to your local park, though you can.
Hmm.
It can be in office.
Yep,
Yeah. And I'm
absolutely.
thinking too, I mean, to that end, then it could be if you're doing virtual therapy and you and your client are both sitting outside somewhere, like in different cities.
Absolutely. I've
Hmm.
done that. That's like, let's just get on the phone and let's sit outside. What do we
Hmm.
see around us? What can we hear?
Hmm.
Sometimes if you're on video, like, yeah, let's show each other what's around us. I
Yeah.
have, some card decks right here. I love my card decks.
Hmm.
But things like that have each of these is like an animal and a plant that has some theme that both that animal and plant represent. Those are ways you can
Hmm.
bring it into the office.
Yeah.
So there's there's so many ways.
Yeah. I'm thinking I was doing a phone session with a client once and we would both take walks.
Yep.
And she was in a different city, so we were taking walks, and all of a sudden I hear this man being like, "Hey, ma'am, you might want to come up here." And I look over and I am the width of a Honda Accord away from a brown bear or black bear. It was literally like I was on the sidewalk, it was right on the other side. So I was like, I'm gonna have to let you go and I'll call you right back. Um, and then went on some stranger's porch until the bear ambled away. But that was some real nature therapy I wasn't planning
There it
on.
is. Exactly. Sometimes it makes itself known whether we're planning it or not.
Yeah,
That's a
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
So I think too about how you mentioned like everybody's outdoorsy. Like you're a human
Mhm.
being, so you're outdoorsy. Um, and the importance of choice.
Yes.
And how choice is so infused with being trauma informed and
Hmm.
like letting our clients lead from a space of safety.
Hmm.
How do you use trauma informed principles in nature-based work?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, we have to again challenge our understanding of a human's relationship to nature. Something that I've been a part of the outdoor industry for many years through summer camps, being a nature-based counselor, rock climbing, and I've noticed this mentality, which is that like everyone loves nature. Nature is great for everybody, and everyone has access. And I do believe, I'm not saying that's not true. I do believe that by being a human being, we have a tie and a connection to the outdoors. I do think that's true. However, I think statements like that don't take into consideration all the ways that nature has been used to harm people,
Hmm.
that has caused trauma, or even, or if maybe we just had an accident. Almost had to get airlifted off a mountain once because I broke an ankle. Things happen in
Yeah.
nature, and those kinds of statements, I think, sometimes don't take into consideration that nature can be scary and has been used to harm. And so I think first and foremost, when we're working with our clients, I ask in my intake, what's your relationship with nature? Do you have a
Mhm.
relationship with nature? Let's talk about that. Because I think we can't just assume that someone, like if I were to just throw out, oh yeah, like start going on walks, or try to get near a body of water. Like, I don't know a client's history with those things. And if I'm just throwing out nature-based suggestions, that actually could, one, not feel accessible at all, or could be touching on a generational trauma or something that that client holds as not being a safe and accessible means for them. So I think just first and foremost, talking to your clients about their relationship with nature as if it's another, it is a relationship in their life, just like we would gather information about, relationship with parents or siblings. So I think that is a very important piece to this before we just jump in and assume, oh, this is great for everybody.
Right. I'm curious, do most of your clients find you because you're nature-based, or do they find you because of your niche and nature-based is like a part of how you're working with them?
It's been a little all over the place. And I would say for the most part, so I work with survivors of the troubled teen industry, which,
Mm,
that part of that is like abusive wilderness therapy
yeah.
programs. And so it ends up kind of being this kind of sub layer, but I would say that I can talk about nature with all of my clients and they'll have something to say because again, like whether it's
Hmm.
just like, oh yeah, I like doing XYZ or no, I've never felt like I could step into those spaces. But yeah, I think for the most part, people find me through that. And I'm excited to build more of this. I'd love to work with people who have had harmful experiences in nature. So I'm working on building that.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about even just culturally in different areas, like I'm in Asheville, North
Hmm.
Carolina. I lived in Seattle, like there, have friends in Denver. Like there are these areas that are very much like it's assumed that you've got a
Yes.
mountain bike somewhere, that you're hiking every weekend.
Hmm.
Um, and for those people who are not feeling like they just don't consider themselves outdoorsy, there can be some kind of shame with being an indoor kid, which
Absolutely.
then that becomes an identity and they don't have any real interest in exploring their relationship with nature. Is that
Oh,
something that
yeah.
you like talk to people about? And how do you, I mean, maybe it's probably not a goal of yours because we don't come into our relationships with clients with goals, but is that on the back burner of any nature therapist's mind of like, how do we incorporate healthy experience with nature for everybody?
Absolutely. I think about that all the time. I live in
Hmm.
Denver.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I
yeah.
moved to Boulder. I moved to Colorado in my mid 20s. Never skied before.
Hmm.
I was a backpacker, but that was my main outdoor thing. And I definitely noticed very quickly this almost like I call it like outdoor elitism. This
Hmm.
idea that there is, and I think that's changing. However, I think for a really long time, and we can get into how this was a very intentional, you know, uh, thing that happened. But for a long time, the idea of an outdoorsy person was a white, cisgendered, able-bodied man that has a lot of money.
Hmm.
And I think most of us have, been to the store and seen the outdoor magazines. And for a long time, none of us, not, excuse me, for a long time, a lot of us would not have looked at those magazines and seen ourselves reflected as someone who could step into those spaces. And oh my gosh, so I'll just, yeah, my now husband took me skiing for the first time as a date. Um,
Hmm.
and oh my, it's a culture shock. I felt
Hmm.
embarrassed that I was 25 and on the bunny slope and with all the like 2-year olds who are
Uh-huh.
learning to ski in Colorado. And yeah, I felt a barrier. And again, like I'm someone who has felt like I could step into outdoor spaces. And so I'm constantly thinking about what are the barriers in place for people feeling like they can step into outdoor spaces. And again, I do believe that any of us can just have a relationship with nature. However, especially if you're trying to get into a certain activity, that can be a huge access point, the gear. You have to buy or
Hmm.
rent all the gear, getting to the location that requires some kind of transportation, lessons. And then also there's the piece of like, are there people who will be there to greet me, people that look like me, people who have similar experiences to me. All of these factors likely impact people's decisions when they ask themselves, can I do that thing? Can I step into that space?
Hmm.
So I think about that a lot. And I would hope that anyone who's a nature based therapist or wants to incorporate these techniques can start from a point of knowing like this is something we should be willing to contend with and talk to our clients about, because just like so many systems in our world, there is a little bit of a perceived hierarchy of who can access these spaces, and I want to get rid of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a perceived hierarchy, but it's also like it is intimidating, like you said.
Hmm.
And you don't want to be the only person with a bunch of 2-year-olds, like the only adult.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I imagine like I don't want to like I wouldn't want to be the only black man in a space or the only Asian woman. I wouldn't want to be the only of anything.
Absolutely.
And if that's how the culture is currently set up or has historically been set up, you know, why put myself in yet another uncomfortable position if I'm not even sure it's going to be worth it?
100%. Absolutely. I remember reading this article in grad school, and I just remember thinking, anyway, it was basically this study about how they were tracking the demographics of people who attended national parks over a series of time. And it was this article saying, like, weird. How come Black people aren't going to national parks? Weird. Why is that
Hmm.
happening? And I'm reading this in my graduate level education, like, are we not going to talk about why that is? We're just going to
Hmm.
say, that's so weird. No, it's not. It was intentional. Super quick TED talky. The
Love it.
first park, first official park in the United States was actually Central Park in New
Hmm.
York City, and it was located where Seneca Village was, which was a primarily Black neighborhood that gave particularly Black men an opportunity to buy land. It was one of the only areas in New York City where that was possible. They destroyed Seneca Village to build Central Park and relocated all of those people. And at that time, by removing the ownership of the homes for those Black men, they lost their right to vote. And you had to own property at that time to vote. So they take away their right to vote, they displace them to a different part of the city, and really build Central Park as this like affluent white people recreation area. So our park system is really has this foundation of exclusion, of erasure, and it's my Roman Empire. I think about it all the time. Is that like
Uh-huh.
that history is there, and so
Hmm.
when we see these stats of, oh, why aren't Black people or BIPOC folk visiting national parks, it's like we did that. We have to. That's not just something that naturally happened.
Hmm. Yeah. And so what do we do to make it better? How do we make the
Yeah.
outdoor spaces more inclusive?
So luckily there's lots of ways. And I said earlier, I think I'm seeing a lot of change. And so first and foremost, I want to shout out, there's so many amazing affinity groups for people. I'm thinking of Hike Club, Indigenous Women Hike, Black Packers. There's so many amazing organizations and groups that are creating access spaces. So it just, again, it just removes those barriers of
Hmm.
people saying on an individual level, I can't do that. I can't go to that park. I can't try that activity. And it just says, no, we'll provide the gear. Come with us as a group. We'll do this together. And so I I love those groups and organizations. And I encourage anyone who's, watching this, find the ones in your area, find what organizations are doing amazing work already, and maybe partner with them. I
Hmm.
think that's a huge thing, especially like partnering with local gear shops to provide, see if they want to like donate some gear, so that if you are a therapist that wants to start including nature-based work, so instead of saying like, oh, I think it would be really cool if we did, a rock climbing session together, and putting that on the client to kind of figure out all those things. It's like, well, actually, I have a harness for you. I have
Hmm.
shoe rentals for you. And I got us access to a gym for the day. So just making sure that, again, asking yourself, what are the barriers for entry and how can we behind the scenes be removing them as
Hmm.
best we can?
It's
So
so
that's,
funny because as you give that example, I'm like, yeah, yeah. And then I'm like, and then how does our field hold us back from being able to do that in some ways? Of like, well, if you've got this agreement, then they're going to know you're with a client. And so there goes HIPAA out the
mm,
door. I mean, it's just like it gets complicated in
for
ways that
sure.
like sometimes can stymie our creativity and figuring things out. Like it just takes more creativity.
It does. It
Hmm.
absolutely does. And I found that to be like a exciting challenge. I find it to be like,
Hmm.
okay, well, let me see how I can do that. And I have come up against that before. I used to do rock climbing therapy more regularly. And yeah, like what do you say to your client? What do you say to the people at the gym? Um, that's actually a really excellent point when doing nature-based work is, I always talk to my clients about like if we're going on a trail or if
Hmm.
we're going to a park, let's have a conversation about, we're not in an office with a sound machine. So how are we going to make sure that the client feels as safe and held as possible in those spaces? And I really just try to return it to the client as much as I can,
Hmm.
um, and giving them that autonomy. And that comes with, like you said, like challenge by choice and like, what feels safe, what doesn't feel safe, what
Hmm.
do you want to be able to access in the first place? Oh, you don't have a desire to like climb a 14er? Okay, but you want to feel comfortable like bird watching in your park? Okay, let's talk about that. While also, of course, always addressing the harm that has been caused
Hmm.
and where we have been, because that's real. We have, like,
Yeah.
again, so much of the outdoor industry is based in appropriation and exclusion. I work in the summer camp world. Basically, American summer camps are founded on this idea of Indigenous appropriation. And so I think a big part of being a nature based clinician is also coming to terms with like, we have to recognize the harm that's been caused.
Hmm.
And that I think for many clients is crucial to be able to even move into those spaces in a semblance of a safe way.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about summer camp. Like I'm a summer camp mom.
Love it.
And it's amazing what summer camp does for my kids,
Mhm.
especially my older daughter who comes back so much more independent,
Mm,
which is something she struggles with during the year. And then it's like she matures an extra year somehow
yeah.
during the
Mm.
summer when she's been more independent. Maybe because of some overprotective parenting on my part. I don't know. I really try not to be a helicopter or a snowplow parent. Um, but I do wonder like the impact of my generation's way of parenting and just thinking about how I grew up, like running through the neighborhoods and like,
Mhm.
there's this weird bog that we used to hang out at. We called it the creek. There was not really a creek. It was just this weird bog that,
Yeah.
and we like stole tools and like made a tree house. Like we were like just little feral
Wow.
children
Yeah.
living this feral children 1980s life. It was great. Um, and like my kids don't get that. They're allowed to walk to the park near our house, but they, sit there obediently with their
Yeah.
friends. They're not ransacking somebody's parents' garage, They don't have that creative spark to make
Mm,
this wild outdoor space more of their own.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm just curious, like, how do you, as a therapist who works in this space, working with teenagers and also working with adults who maybe didn't have that feral childhood,
Yeah.
Um, just talk to me about all of that.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, again, another thing I think about a lot. My mom and my aunt have such amazing stories of growing up in rural Pennsylvania, just in befriending like their favorite boulder or this tree that they would go and visit. And I think for a variety of reasons, we've seen a decline in kids feeling, or maybe even parents feeling like kids can do that in a safe way. And understandable reasons, right? I mean, we know a lot more than we
Mhm.
once did, and we want to keep our kiddos safe. And so, and I think there has to be this balance. And so something that we've seen kind of again in the outdoor industry world is there has been a decrease in kids feeling like they can interact with the environment. And I'm forgetting all the details, but I think it had to do with like a study related to leave no trace and teaching kids leave no trace principles
Oh.
and actually seeing kids like, oh, wait, I can cause harm. I could hurt the environment if I do this. Maybe I just shouldn't do it. And again, I'm not dissing leave no trace. Absolutely leave it better than we found it.
Mhm.
And and whoa, we don't want that. We don't want kids feeling so afraid that they're going to hurt the world around them. You know, kids with their big compassionate hearts, like of course they don't want to harm the environment, but we can't equate building relationship and interacting with the world around us with, oh, I'm going to cause it harm, because
Mhm.
it's, and I speak a lot to our relationship with nature is a relationship. That is something that is huge to my practice, but it's also not an original concept. You know, I turn to indigenous teachers a lot and about how did people used to or and still do build relationship, beautiful symbiotic relationship with the world around them, and it is a relationship. And so how I think the question becomes, how do we give our kids the tools to say, okay, yeah, I if I'm holding this huge stick, yeah, and I'm willy-nilly just running around with it, maybe I'm going to knock into my sister or maybe I'm going to fall
Mhm.
over. That's true. And instead of saying, I'm big on like just shifting our language. I used to work at a nature-based preschool, so I got to practice this a lot.
Mhm.
Instead of saying like, no, be careful, you can't run with that big stick. Instead, I can say, oh, hey, I see you have that big stick. Big sticks need big space. Let's find a space.
Mm.
You can use that. Or again, I go a lot to the be careful.
Mhm.
Maybe instead of be careful, do you have a plan for that? I see you're climbing on those rocks. Do you feel stable? Giving kids the tools to check in with themselves, check in with their body to say, do I feel okay right now? Does this feel like a fun and safe interaction with the world around me? And I think what's most crucial, and again, that I've seen a shift of just in my lifetime and in my studies of the last few decades, is I think a big increase in electronics has,
Mhm.
is part of this. But like I said, I listen to my mom talk and she talks about this favorite boulder she had. And like from childhood through high school, she would go to this same boulder and sit and read and journal. And like this boulder became her friend. And one of my favorite memories from the nature-based preschool is one of our rowdy little kids getting really worked up, having a lot of big feelings. And I watched him just kind of like get frustrated and he went and he sat by a tree and he just like was working through his emotions, like with his
Mhm.
tree buddy.
Yeah.
And that was so powerful to see because if
Mhm.
3-year-olds can get it, we all can get it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm a little all over the place, but I think one of the biggest things parents these days can do is one, challenge their own, you know, fears. What,
Mhm.
because that's important. It's like, why do I feel nervous about this? What is coming up for me that I want to protect my child from?
Mhm.
And then bring in this relationship and how can I incorporate nature into my kid's life in a way that is going to be a lasting, sustainable relationship and give them the tools to interact in a way that, yeah, that is healthy. Give them the tools to, I think modeling consent in nature is a huge thing. So yeah, like tell them how to interact. Okay, you want to use some leaves for a craft. Okay, let's see if we can find some leaves that have already fallen on the ground instead of going and picking them off the tree.
Hmm.
These are all ways that we could, instead of saying, no, don't do that,
Right.
here's how to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think about too, like parental concern, like the be careful urge, which I totally have,
Mm-hmm.
and the need for risk taking in kids in order to build confidence, in order to like learn limits. Um, they're at odds with each other in such a striking way that
Yeah.
I, yeah, when you were talking about the alternatives to be careful, I was like, I didn't know that. I had a lot of be careful as my kids were, I mean, they're still fairly young. I don't say it as much now, but when they were smaller, and I do see how, as a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, they are more cautious than they need to be. They can trust their
Mm-hmm.
bodies more. They can trust
Yeah.
that tree. Like when we had Hurricane Helene and like,
Mm.
I mean, we had more tree than road on our street. There's like, I think we had over 100 trees come down in our on our street.
Wow.
Um, Watching the kids get out and play. This was not safe, right? Like we kept them away from the ones with wires in them and stuff like that. But like these trees weren't super stable, but I think all the parents were so like just exhausted that we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have our normal level of like over functioning
Sure.
parenting going on. We're like, well, yeah, you can play on that one while we chainsaw this one, in a way that I really think was good for them. Like they were truly
Yeah.
exploring. Like I saw my childhood in all these neighborhood kids teetering on this trunk that could have just fallen over and squished them. Um, and I think that's the most free I've seen these
Mm.
kids. And
Yeah.
like, and it's because we were all just so exhausted and grieving and freaked out that we couldn't overparent.
And I think that just so beautifully speaks to the spirit of children. I think,
Hmm.
and in so many ways, we know that children are more in tune with themselves, and kids are authentically themselves before they're taught all this societal BS
Hmm.
about how they should be and how they should show up. And I just think that's such a beautiful example of like when we just let kids be kids, they have this innate curiosity and this wonder and this connection to the world around them
Hmm.
that, and I think that's something that is very much taught, is this idea that humans are here and nature is this other thing and we're not
Hmm.
a part of it. And kids don't feel that way. Kids know they're a part of nature. They want to jump in the mud puddles. They want to climb the trees. They want to pull the worms out of the ground. They feel it.
Yeah.
And so I often think about, okay, how as adults in their life can we foster that and give them the tools to hopefully not lose that? I had to reteach myself a lot, and it's a work in progress, but that natural childlike wonder of
Hmm.
just like, oh, like I just feel like I want to like run right now, or like I'm just gonna sit by this flower for a bit. These are things that I think a lot of us adults lose. And I
Hmm.
think that's something I love to work with my adult clients on is, okay, we never had to lose this, and a lot of us maybe got lost along the way. Let's find that spark again, because it is a relationship and it is a connection that can bring so much meaning
Hmm.
to everybody.
Yeah. What do you think makes us lose it? What happens?
Mm. I think a lot of reasons. One is I think a lot of us want to be very cautious and careful. A lot of us build that messaging in of, I want to be safe. I don't want to step outside of what can keep me safe and contained. And I do think a lot of it is this piece of, I'm not a part of nature,
Hmm.
especially as we get swept up in working and going to school and all these things that are a big part of our culture. We don't continue that tie, which there are ways that nature and having a close relationship with the world around us can just carry us through everything in our life. But I think it's just not fostered. I mean, I think schools are getting better, but I remember in elementary school, like how often we would say, can we have class outside? Can we have class outside? Like kids, we want it.
Hmm.
And it's just not something I think. right now, that is a big part of our culture, is building relationship with nature just into the everyday life. And so I think that's a big piece of that. And again, going back to decolonization and all of these things from the very foundation of our country is this separation, this us versus them. And
Hmm.
nature has become this other thing. And I think the more that we remind ourselves it's not this other thing, it's actually something that we all have this innate connection to, that we can just say, I want to foster this
Hmm.
and foster it just like you would any other relationship. It has the potential to, again, like carry us through so many challenging times in our lives. And I do think a disconnection to the world around us is a big part of a lot of what we're seeing happening around the world right now.
Yeah. I think about COVID and how outdoors became the safe
Mhm.
space to, be in community.
Yep.
And how like my kids' school went back in August of 2020, which was
Wow.
yeah, pretty early. It's a
Yeah.
private school and they're on the campus has a lot of land. So they did a lot of classes outdoors. Every lunch was outdoors. If it was raining, okay. Like it was very
Hmm.
like this is how we're going to do education for the time being in a way that I mean, I don't know that my kids had ever spent that much time outside as they did that year. And
Yeah.
I kind of am sad that that decreased instead of stayed the same or increased.
I think lockdowns are such a potent example of that. We still have that tie to the world around us. I think even those of us who would consider ourselves like inside people, or, you
Hmm.
know, it's like when that was taken away, when it was like, no, stay inside. I think a lot of us were like, no, obviously there was so much happening for all of us,
Hmm.
but we saw a huge increase in people going outside, going to trails, visiting parks. It actually created this huge like infrastructure challenge where trails weren't being maintained and like
Hmm.
facilities because there was such a huge influx of
Right.
people wanting to be outside. And what a testament to, again, that just like innate drive we have.
Hmm.
It's like, no, I need to go. I went and backpacked on the Appalachian Trail for a couple months in 2020. So
Hmm.
I did it too. And I think that's something that I wish was more of it's hard to say, anything we want to be a lasting from the pandemic, but
Right.
it's right there. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
kids were spending more out time. Excuse me, kids were spending more time outside.
Hmm.
All of us were. And yeah, I would be so curious of to like I think we're gonna be, learning so much for many decades to come about that time and the lasting impact. But I would love to see some studies in a decade of the connection between those who spent more time outside and like what did that have to do for their mental health, their physical health, all of that. I'm curious to see how that pans out.
Yeah. I think too about the pool. Like, I'm sure that Colorado got it also, but here in Asheville, because we have so many beautiful trails and, it's a gorgeous area to be
Mm-hmm.
outdoors. Um, we had so many people from cities moving here. They were able to work remotely. And it's like there was this innate sense of like, well, if I can live anywhere, I want to live somewhere where I can be outside and it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, well, that did make our real estate market very interesting. It like, I love that people were able to then fulfill their needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad they brought their jobs with them because there aren't any here.
Yeah.
You got to bring your own job to Asheville. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And I, and again, I think about the people also like so the summer camp I worked at forever,
Hmm.
we were obviously closed in 2020, and a group of friends just like rented it. They were like, we don't want to live in the city, so we're just going to go and rent a summer camp. And again, it just shows that people want this. And it also makes me think about the people who like couldn't relocate, people who are maybe in big cities and what was that like? And I also think, so I think a lot about, again, like what what historic or things that have happened in our culture and very like different societies that have created that barrier to the outdoors. And I wonder, I imagine there must be people who didn't think the outdoors were a haven during that
Mhm.
time, because outdoors, that's where COVID is, right? I have to
Yeah.
go to the grocery store, I have to
Mhm.
go on the subway. And so there's that piece too of, I wonder how many people now feel that like, oh, wait, actually the outdoors is where the danger is.
Mhm.
And what do we do with that? And again, there's just that, I think this is just such a big part of it. There's going to be people who know they can go and find those outdoor spaces, and that is a haven.
Mhm.
And, that's wonderful in one way. And then also, how do we think of the people who didn't have that experience and now maybe have a very opposite feeling about the outdoors?
Mhm. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. Just all the different cultural factors that come together and move apart and come together. Like it's very interesting how I just said, I don't know that I've ever really considered, like, I have a relationship with nature until this
Mm,
conversation. I
yeah.
do. And it's complex. Like you said, like it's not just like nature's good.
Yeah.
Like I like nature under these circumstances. That's when I feel safe. This is when I feel comfortable. This is when I feel challenged in a good way. Um, yeah.
Absolutely. And that's something that I will say it was a frustration point for me when I was in graduate school is I loved my cohort. I have a lot of like very traditionally like, outdoorsy people in my life. And I think something I saw was this mentality around like we can conquer nature. It's like, well,
Mhm.
no, no,
It's kind of
no,
not the
nature,
point.
not the point. One, not the point. Two, Mother Nature is in control here.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember there was this time in my grad school where there's a huge blizzard. And because we were a nature-based cohort, no one wanted to be on Zoom. We're like, let's get to class in person. It's like, but there's a blizzard happening. Why are we the nature-based therapists in training saying, oh, let's just risk our safety? Like someone tried to get to class and slid down a hill.
Yeah,
And
no.
to me, it just like that's not worth it. That goes against what at least I'm trying to instill in my clients. This is nature is not something to be conquered. It is not something for us to, push through, because
Hmm.
that's when the harmful experiences happen. I have a friend who, it might seem small, but I have a friend who religiously carries a water bottle with them everywhere they go because they went on a hike like 4 years ago and ran out of water.
Hmm.
And it was scary. They felt very uncomfortable in their body. And now, almost to an obsessive point, carry a water bottle with them everywhere they go because, yeah, running out of
Hmm.
water on a long hike, that can
Yeah.
be scary. That has been harmful to people
Yep.
before. So, yeah, and it is a relationship just like all the others. And this was a big point of my capstone research is if with a big part of nature-based therapy is the understanding that we can build a relationship to nature. And if that is true, then just like any other relationship, there can be rupture and repair.
Hmm.
It's not we we can't excuse our relationship from nature from having conflict, from having moments of, oh, maybe I need to step back and reevaluate this relationship.
Hmm.
So that's something I really try to talk about with other clinicians or just people in the outdoor world is that, yeah, like nature can be scary. Nature can be amazing and beautiful and like life changing, and it can be scary and harmful. So how do
Hmm.
we balance those things and know that that's a part of the relationship?
Yeah. It's interesting. You talking about the water bottle made me realize I'm so annoying about any new trail I go on. I'm like, well, is it out and back?
Mm,
Um, because I once got lost for 7 hours on a hike without any water because it was going to be a quick before dinner, like 20, 30 minutes that I thought was just going to take me right back to where I needed to be, but was an out and back that led to me like needing to hitchhike back to town, like to do all sorts of things to get back home. And I was so dehydrated and like the kind where
Yeah,
you can't keep anything down for days, that like I realize now, like that's always the first question I ask. Not,
yeah.
is there a, like, are we summiting something? Is there a beautiful view? It's always like, is it
Mhm.
an out and back? I just need to know on the front end.
Well, that's so
Yeah,
understandable
yeah.
because how do we keep ourselves safe in these environments?
Mm-hmm.
It's, we have to think about those things. And
Yeah.
it makes me sad when I hear people just kind of diminishing relationship with nature, that it is just this like thing we can just jump into. And it's like, but let's be aware that, yeah, running out of water. I broke an ankle hiking once.
Mm-hmm.
Or just people, I have a friend who's a rock climber and was on a trip where someone died.
Mm.
It's, these things happen,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to, I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom when working with clients. And I want to equip my clients with the tools to feel safe in these situations. And I think that base level of safety builds the confidence to then explore that relationship with nature. Going back to the example with kids, if you give kids the tools to check in and say, oh, I'm actually like kind of wobbly on this rock I'm jumping on,
Mm-hmm.
they will then feel more confident to go across the creek because they know, oh, I can check in with myself. I have the tools to know, oh, can I keep going? Should I go back? Should I find an alternate route? Because without that base understanding of autonomy and checking in with yourself, that's where that disconnect is fostered.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we see accidents happen. That's where we see harm happen.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about like just the relationship of human beings and
Mhm.
nature. Let's bring this to therapy specifically. Um, how do we maybe adapt nature-based approaches to meet the needs of children or adults with maybe some psych concerns, like who
Mhm.
is this good for? Who is this not good for? Is there a line at all? Um, how do we use nature to truly help our clients?
I'm biased. So I think that nature based therapy can be for everyone because, again, human beings are nature. We have that connection. I think what sets nature based techniques apart from maybe like an art therapy or music therapy, which is, again, all beautiful and amazing techniques, connection to nature, I don't think is something that any of us have to learn. It's just something we have. So then the question for me becomes, what is going to be meaningful and helpful for my client? What are they working on that incorporating relationship to nature or bringing that into sessions? How is that going to benefit them? And really just, again, giving them so as much autonomy. I try to do that always with my clients, but giving
Hmm.
them as much choice as possible. What's going to feel good? What's going to add to your life? Um, and also just talking about like, there's so many ways that when you, once you start thinking about it, it's everywhere. Or maybe that's just, again, my Roman Empire kind of thing.
Hmm.
But like things like bilateral stimulation
Hmm.
started in a park, started by, someone going on a walk in a park and noticing like, oh, interesting. And so there already are so many techniques that we can just kind of like, oh, let's do this. Like, yes, this is great. And we can also go for a walk outside and build that connection. I think of another quick example, but going back to like working with children and letting them lead. And I think, especially with young kids or teenagers, that connection is already there. My first year working at my summer camp, it was the evening campfire, and the camper was taking fistfuls of pebbles and chucking them into the campfire. And many counselors like went over and like tried to redirect him, say, no, we can't do that. That's disruptive. Kept doing it. He kept throwing the handfuls of rocks. I'll never forget this. Like this landed with me. And then one other counselor just goes and sits next to him and then just picks up one pebble and just kind of gently tosses it. And the kid followed suit
Hmm.
and was able to just like, okay, yeah, we can do this less disruptive, got his need met.
Hmm.
And that creativity of, okay, this kid is not acting out for, you know, just to do it. It's not,
Right.
very rarely are kids just like, I want to be disruptive to be disruptive. There's something, there's a need that needs to be met. And I think that was just such a potent example of, okay, how can I meet this kid with this, whether it's a tactile experience or, you know, just needing like a fidget of some kind. And that counselor just was so beautifully able to meet them. And I
Hmm.
try to bring that into my work of what are you craving? What are you wanting? Something I'll do is again, I always will talk to my clients about what's your relationship to nature? Do you feel like you have one? Is that something you're wanting? And so I will always have like I mentioned in the past, I've had just like bins of soil. I've had
Hmm.
potted plants. I have windows in my office. And I will just make sure I'm incorporating my therapy-based techniques in a way that ties in something having to do with nature, um, with using the plants. And I just have found that it's a very seamless integration of building in nature-based techniques, and they're highly adaptable. Um, Again, I think often people will be like, well, I can't do that thing, or I don't have the body to do that thing, or like, no one in my family does that. It's like, well, do you want to do that? What about that feels enticing to you? What feels good about that? And how can we slowly build to get there?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that there's so many different ways to adapt nature-based techniques when, again, going back to what I said before, of just like checking our own expectations of, oh, is that nature-based therapy? I've heard people say like, oh, having a plant in your office, that's not nature-based therapy. Why? Why
Hmm.
can't that be? If I have a client who, I had a young client who got excited every week to come and like spritz my plants in the
Hmm.
office and like see, and like that was not someone that came in wanting nature-based therapy. It was just something that we started doing and was exciting for them to come back like, oh, look at this new leaf that's growing. And I think when you offer clients opportunity for these things, you'll just see where they naturally gravitate towards. It's, okay, let's go more into that, let's build on that.
Yeah. It's fun to think about how it doesn't have to be a whole production clinically to
No,
incorporate.
no, it doesn't. And there's just so many ways you can pull from. I I just had an amazing few sessions with a client where we are using herbalism
Hmm.
to help her understand her heritage. I'm a quarter Puerto Rican. I got to go to Puerto Rico for the first time earlier this summer, and while I was there, I was able to buy like a book of traditional Puerto Rican herbalism recipes and how indigenous Puerto Ricans use plants and nature. And I think that's a really beautiful piece of, okay, that's a link we can do. Or I work with a lot of queer clients. Oh my gosh. So I'm working with a teenager that's like, oh, I'm the only non-binary person at my school. I'm so, I'm weird. Okay, well, let's go ahead and pull in all of these fungi, plants, animals that are queer in some way,
Hmm.
using nature to just find what our clients are working on and say, okay, well, look how this shows up in the world around us. This is not just some human anomaly.
Hmm.
No, this is everywhere. And there are ties. And again, I think about these things a lot, but I have yet to find something that a client's working on that couldn't be connected to nature, the world around them, finding a metaphor in some way. It's
Hmm.
always there if we look for it.
Yeah. I'm thinking too about how just observing nature is like immediate mindfulness. just like I've
Hmm.
got this huge window out in front of me right now, and how on days when it snows, because
Hmm.
I'm from the South, like, and I lived in Seattle, so I'm like, I'm from places that it doesn't snow often, and when it
Yeah.
does, like everything shuts down. So I'm still in awe like a child every time it snows. And it's really hard for me to work. It's not snowing now, September 2nd, but it's not snow, but it's hard for me to work when it's snowing because I'm just like I just want to watch it fall because it's so special.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that just reminds me of like I'm from upstate New York, and I remember every year that first snow, it does
Hmm.
snow a lot in upstate New York. And yet that first snow, I remember all of us would run to the windows. It's like, there it is. And I think I would take a guess that all of us have something either that still as adults or when we were children just captivated us for
Hmm.
whatever reason. It just like gripped us. I am an autumnal lady. I am the most
Hmm.
basic like autumn person. And I will look at autumnal foliage and I'm just like, what? I've seen
Hmm.
it for, 29 falls, and yet every time I'm like, how is this possible? And I think all of us have something like that, whether it's
Hmm.
this first snowfall or, a favorite plant or animal that we've observed that for whatever reason we felt a connection to or an excitement about. And
Hmm.
that is because we're a part of it. That is ancestral connection to the world
Hmm.
around us. And I think that is such a beautiful place to start if people feel like they don't have a strong connection to the outdoors. Like, well, what's that thing? What's that memory you have from childhood where, yeah, you just like were sitting in a creek for hours catching crawdads, or yeah, there's something, there is something. And can we, okay, what was amazing about that? Why did that captivate you? How did you feel in that moment? And we can
Hmm.
build from there. But yeah, we all have something like that.
Hmm. Yeah, and probably multiple things. And I like that you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned like plants and animals because I'm guessing there's some people who just gravitate a little bit more towards like weather versus plants versus animals. Like they just have a pull. Like we have bunnies that are always in our yard. Like
Yes.
all year except the winter, we've got a bunny in the yard in the mornings and watching them like just nibble on our little grass, and we all just will like watch. We're just eating our
Yep.
breakfast and watching through the window, and it's like they're just our buddies that come all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Um, and and then we were like, when the hurricane came, we were like, oh, I bet all those bunnies underground are drowned, like they're gone. But
Mm.
apparently they weren't, so that's good because they're
Yes.
smart and they know to get up, I guess. I don't know. Um, and living in an area that has a lot of bear and a lot of deer and a lot of turkey, like I get
Mm-hmm.
so excited about turkeys for some reason.
I'm that way with deer. Again, I'm
Yeah.
from the Northeast. We have a lot of deer. A lot of people think
Hmm.
they're like pests. I love deer.
Yeah.
And I, you're right. I think we all have these things that wherever we grew up, whatever our life situations were, there's something that excites us and ties us to the world around us. And those relationships should not be diminished. I think of, the book that's coming to mind right now is oh, what's it called? Oh yeah, Where the Crawdads Sing.
Hmm.
I don't know. Yes.
Yeah.
And I just think of how so many people will shun relationships with other non-human beings. And obviously I'm
Hmm.
doing this because that is a made up concept that
Right.
we are other.
Hmm.
And but yeah, building connections with animals. I took one of the courses I took in graduate school was equine assisted therapy, so working with
Hmm.
horses. While that is not, I power to the people who do equine therapy, but it was amazing to learn about, and just how the limbic systems of horses and humans are actually very similar. And so people who build a strong connection with horses, many people will feel like they can connect with a horse or another animal more so than other humans.
Hmm.
How we should be normalizing that. That is not something that makes you weird or like antisocial. No, there is science that shows like no, we do have these connections with these other beings.
Hmm.
And I hope that that is something that we can continue to move away from, is this idea that those connections are less than connections with other people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like I worked with a number of people who are equestrians, who would say, "Oh, well, I'm training this new horse, so I really have to like get regulated before I like get out of the
Mm-hmm.
car and go to the barn." And these are folks, some of them are folks who like really had a very hard time with regulation in other areas of their life. So we're able to bring in like, okay, how do you do that? How can you bring that into that conversation with your partner or your kid or your
Yeah.
boss? How do you like use this tool you already have been practicing for a long time? And it's interesting because I never thought of equine therapy as nature-based, but of course it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very cool.
It's so cool. And yeah, just so much of it. Again, like I remember taking a horticulture therapy class with gardening therapy and just like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this is all right there. Like it
Yeah.
is right there for us. The metaphors, the comparisons, the ways that we can, yeah, like how can you do this in life outside of this session or, this garden? And I used to think that was just like a coincidence, like, oh, wahaha. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not. I think it's right there
Mm-hmm.
because it is a very obvious connection.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, of course, we're going to feel some semblance of connection to the earth, to our plants that we grow in our garden, to
Mm-hmm.
the neighborhood animals, because this is a little woo woo, but I believe that even, all these generations later, we have this connection that as much as people have tried to like separate from, I don't think that's something we can ever like fully stamp out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a matter of like, okay, what are you feeling called to? What feels exciting and meaningful when we think about relating to the world around us? And how can we use that to add to your life?
Mm-hmm.
And one of my, I have it right over here. One of my all-time favorite books is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she talks about the symbiotic relationships. There are so many plant species, animals that benefit from interaction with human beings when done in a respectful, sustainable way. And
Mm-hmm.
going back to our conversation about like kids and interacting with the world around them, if we interact with the world around us in those safe, respectful, loving ways, we all flourish.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is, it's an environmental issue, it's a mental health issue. There's so many things that can be improved upon if we just remove those barriers to building lasting relationship with the world around us.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too, thinking about horticulture therapy and just like how as I've gotten older, I've gone from saying like, oh, I have a brown thumb, I've got a black thumb, everything dies, everything I touch dies. And it's because I was at a place where I was not able to keep track of like, when did I water this? Oh, it's been a while, so I'm going to overwater it. And now I've kept indoor plants alive for like 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I can't say that I have a black thumb anymore. Like, that's
Yeah,
not true. And just even letting go of that identity that I formed sometime in my 20s when I was,
yeah,
wild, I had other shit to do. Like now I'm like, oh, well, what do I want my outdoor garden to look like? Like, how do I learn what I need to learn to be able to create? And of course, my husband's like, just throw some seeds, do some fun stuff, play with it. And I'm like, no, it has to be right. So there's still the personality differences that can get in there and stymie me, right? Of like, oh, but I don't want to mess it up. So like seeing how perfectionism that I have squashed in healthy ways in other areas of my life can pop up with a new thing. Like it's just ripe, right? It's super ripe
yes,
for some therapy right there, for some nature-based therapy.
yes,
Like, what would it
absolutely.
be like to throw some wildflowers? Just throw them and see what happens. Yeah.
And that's the exciting part about it is once we kind of like check all those like expectations and these limiting beliefs, these societal made up things about who can access, once we get rid of those, it's just fun and exciting.
Yeah.
And there are going to be differences. My husband's the plant dad.
Hmm.
Uh, oh my gosh, they've all got names.
Hmm.
And I have ADHD. I can't keep track of all of that, but that's what feels amazing to him. It adds
Hmm.
so much to his life to care for his houseplants. For me, I love, you know, taking the dog for a walk and
Hmm.
identifying the different plants in the neighborhood. And I love herbalism and, making different things in my kitchen, and we each get to build our own relationship. And it's
Yeah.
going to look different, whether that's,
Hmm.
just the seemingly obvious differences of like, I'm a winter sport person and I'm a summer sport person, whatever it is. But again, it goes right back down to, well, yeah, I live in a big city and I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to purposely try and find all the examples of resilience I see in nature.
Hmm.
The weed going through the sidewalk.
Hmm.
Or I'm going to, you know, print off pictures of some of my favorite places I've visited in nature and I'm going to have them in my office. These are all ways that we can build that connection. And if there's one thing people take away from this is that no one gets to define that for you.
Yeah.
And I think so often it's like, oh, you've never snowboarded, or like how you've never done a 14. It's like, okay, well, maybe that's not my way of being in nature. And
Hmm.
if me sitting in my yard, that can't be different. And that was a big thing. I was very vocal in my graduate school program is me doing Zoom nature-based therapy with a potted plant and looking out the window has to be the same nature therapy as the people who are doing week-long backpacking trips.
Hmm.
Because if we make that different, what are we saying about the people who are doing those activities?
Right.
What does that
And
make
who has
you?
access to what? Like can't
Exactly.
probably can't easily backpack if you're a wheelchair user. Are there ways? Possibly, but I don't know if that's really the goal.
So this has changed since when I was in grad school, but when at the time, it was a requirement that every cohort of nature-based therapists, every person, I believe it was needed to be able to hike 10 miles through a canyon with a 60-pound backpack. You had to.
Hmm.
And someone ended up leaving my cohort because that was not something their body was able to do.
Yeah.
And I felt so much sadness about that because that person, like I wanted that person in the world of nature-based therapy. And
Hmm.
the fact that the nature-based therapists in training, even were given this parameter of this is something your body, this like very hard thing, that's not like walking a mile, like 10 miles with a 60
Right.
pound pack. That's
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
And again, so if we are putting those limitations on the people who can offer these things, like then what are we saying about who can do this, who can
Right.
participate? And so I'm happy to see a lot of those things changing, but that was 5 years ago. Um,
Hmm.
it's There's still a lot of movement to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I feel like this is giving people an opportunity to think about the fact that they have a relationship with nature, the fact that each of their clients does.
Mhm.
How might it be helpful to bring some nature-based therapy into your therapy? See what
Yeah.
happens. Maybe do a little on yourself first, like do some analyzing, some deep thinking, some mindfulness, some just being outdoors and see what happens.
See what happens. Absolutely. Yeah, if I hope people can view this as like a way to experiment and get creative. It's right there. It really is. Even if you are in Manhattan or wherever, like it's there. So
Yeah.
we just gotta look around. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope that broadened your clinical horizons. Head over to notboringces.com to get your CE credit. Want to have a not boring conversation with me about your clinical area of expertise? You can apply there too. If you like this conversation, leave us a 5-star review, tell a friend, and be sure to subscribe for future conversations.